Welcome. My name is Kip Ferguson from MotivologyMatters.com. And today we're going to take a look at Ken Wydro's Think on Your Feet. This is an excellent book that Ken has put together for us that outlines skills for communication, either for speakers or for communicators. And since most all of us talk every day, this is excellent material for us to take a look at. So we're going to walk through each of the 10 chapters of his book and really give you a feel for the material that is presented for us. In chapter 1, titled All Those Eyes, we take a look at the psychological reaction that we have when we're put into a speaking situation. And we'll analyze all of the psychological effects that happen and actually some of the physical impact that that has. Then we'll take a look at 3 key factors, what Ken really sets down as a foundation of the book, taking a look at relaxation, concentration, and preparation. By looking at those 3 items and setting the foundation, it really helps us establish our control as we continue through the rest of the book and build our comfortable nature speaking. Ken then transitions into chapter 2, where he gives a very detailed examination of the slight edge technique. This is where we have a slight edge, not a big edge. By increasing by just a small percentage, we're able to increase our performance as long as we keep focusing on the slight edges. And we have to do 2 things every day. And he'll show us those 2 things, and we'll examine those and how we can improve by just doing those 2 things every day. And as you get into the slight edge technique, he then gives us 13 suggestions on how we can improve ourselves going through that technique. Excellent chapter, good examination of the slight edge technique. The attitude of altitude. In chapter 3, we really look at, with Ken, an elevated perspective so that we are kind of stepping out of the situation, stepping back, getting a perspective, and really looking at what's going on for our speaking and for our communication. And then he talks about a thermostat consciousness. Where do we measure the degree, the heat, the situation that we're in? And then he gives an excellent image of multi-leveled thinking, where he walks us through the task, and then he talks about the PREP formula, the PREP, and then we switch into our words and actions. The following 3 chapters, Ken kind of breaks down that that formula. And in chapter 4 is the first, which is our tasks, our background thinking. And he looks at the fundamental laws of communication. He looks at task clarification, how we're clarifying what we're working on. And then he examines how we can relax under pressure, how we can listen without criticism. And those are really key for us, because if we can relax and make sure that we're not criticizing, we're ahead of the game. And we want to change that negative to a positive. And a key factor, and what is really a nice item here, is enjoying the day. So we have to enjoy where we're at, set our background thinking. Which then transfers us into that PREP formula that Ken lays out for us. These are the blueprints and our game plans. So this is really focusing on our planning and making sure that we're set and prepared to go into whatever situation lays ahead of us. So that's what the PRP really does for us. He really lays down some organizing principles so that we're organized as we go into that situation. And then he gives us some questions to ask, which really helps us gain focus and perspective on what's going around us, what's going on with that situation. So those questions to ask are really key in this chapter. And then as we get into chapter 6, we really get into some real meat of the book, some great material here. These are the nuts and bolts, the communication, where it's focused on you. This is really where the action is. And he shows you how we can put the focus on the audience. And then he did something really cool here with Ohm's law and looking at resistance and drawing a comparison between electrical energy and our own energy. Great diagram there that we'll take a look at. He then talks about your emotional blocks, how we're stopping that energy flow. And then he lays down some communication rules for the road, something that we can use as we move forward in our communication. Now that we've got a lot of key factors of our communication under control in those first parts of the book, Ken really starts to focus a little bit more detail in some areas where he can really refine. And chapter 7 is real key here with the fine-tuning and reading aloud. So really some focus on practice. He gives us some reading aloud exercises. He talks about the Rorschach of life, which I thought was a real neat comparison as we're looking kind of at an ink blot type comparison. And then the law of non-resistance here, very nice focus there. And then talks about what station are you tuned into. So really is bringing down this fine-tuning so that we've moved beyond our initial steps. When I got to chapter 8 in Ken's book, it kind of surprised me because Ken made a divergence from the rest of his material. He starts out really explaining a key factor for speakers, which is building and collecting some good stories. Get your favorite stories. But then the rest of the chapter, beyond just the first page or so there, he gives you a sample of a story collection. So this really isn't his writing per se. It's giving you the stories that he works with, that he has used in his speaking, just so that you have a feel when you are looking for stories to use, what a good collection looks like. While there are technically 10 chapters in Ken's book, chapter 9 is really where he wraps a lot of items up and is really the last full complete chapter in the book. And he talks about the formal presentation. This is kind of the culmination of everything that we've worked on throughout the entire book, when we are really put into that pressure situation. And he talks about this being a process and not an event. So we really have to work through that process that he's laid out. And taking a look at that creative process technique, 10 Commandments of Creative Communication. Excellent chapter, great wrap up of the book, and then we'll transition into the actual final chapter 10. For our review, we'll actually talk about Ken's chapter 10, which is just kind of a wrap-up of the book. It's only a couple pages long, so we'll take a quick examination of that. But then we'll talk about the program as a whole and give you a summary of the book so that you can really have that wrap-up and the closure on the material that we've put together for you on Ken's book. So that will be our kind of final part of the material there. So I thank you for taking a look at this introduction. I hope that you come back and check the other parts of our video. My name is Kip Ferguson, and I am from MotivologyMatters.com. I encourage you to stop by, check out the blog where we will have this posted, and we'll have other materials available for you as well. Thank you again.